Grandma, why did Daddy say you're too crazy to own a house? So I invited a judge to dinner. The porcelain tea set my mother gave me for my wedding sits perfectly aligned on the mahogany dining table, each cup positioned with the precision of a woman who has spent 73 years understanding that details matter. The afternoon light streams through the lace curtains I've been washing and ironing every week for 45 years, casting delicate shadows across the polished silver that belonged to my grandmother. This house has been my sanctuary, my achievement, my proof that a woman from humble beginnings could build something lasting and beautiful. I never imagined that my own son would try to take it all away from me. The betrayal cuts deeper than any physical pain I've ever endured, deeper than childbirth, deeper than losing my husband 5 years ago. But today, as I arrange fresh roses in the crystal vase, I'm not the helpless old woman my son thinks I am. Today, I'm taking back control of my life. Before we continue with this incredible story, I want to ask you to take a moment to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love connecting with our community around the world. If the story touches your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We're here to support families going through difficult times, and your engagement helps us reach more people who need to hear these stories of strength and resilience. ***. My son Michael has always been ambitious, but somewhere along the way, ambition turned into greed. It started small, asking to borrow money for his business ventures, requesting help with his mortgage when times were tough. I gave willingly because he was my child, my only son, and I believed in supporting family. But borrowing turned into expecting, and expecting turned into demanding. Last month, when I refused to co-sign another loan for his failing restaurant, he looked me straight in the eye and said, "Mom, maybe it's time we talked about your living situation. This house is too big for you, and frankly, I'm worried about your mental state." Mental state. The words echo in my mind as I dust the family photographs lining the mantelpiece. There's Michael at his high school graduation, beaming with pride. There he is on his wedding day, promising his bride he'd take care of his family. And there's little Emma, my 6-year-old granddaughter, gap-toothed and giggling in my arms just last Christmas. She's the one who innocently asked the question that shattered my heart and opened my eyes. "Grandma, why did Daddy say you're too crazy to own a house?" The manipulation had been subtle at first. Michael would visit with his wife Jennifer and make comments about my forgetfulness. "Mom, you told us that story already," he'd say with a patronizing smile. Or, "Are you sure you turned off the stove? You've been so scattered lately." He'd exchange meaningful glances with Jennifer, those silent conversations that excluded me from my own life. He started bringing printed articles about elderly care facilities, leaving them strategically on my coffee table. "Just for your information, Mom, some of these places are really nice." But I wasn't scattered or confused. I was grieving my husband and adjusting to life alone, which is entirely normal for a woman in my position. I knew exactly what was happening. Michael needed money, and my house, worth nearly $500,000 in today's market, represented a solution to his financial problems. If he could prove I was incompetent, he could gain legal control over my assets through guardianship. It's a scheme I'd read about in the newspaper, adult children exploiting their aging parents for financial gain. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago during what I thought was a routine family dinner. Michael had invited Dr. Harrison, a psychiatrist who happened to be a friend of his from college. Throughout the meal, Dr. Harrison asked seemingly innocent questions about my daily routine, my memory, my decision-making processes. I felt like a specimen under a microscope. When I excused myself to use the bathroom, I overheard Michael whispering urgently, "See what I mean? She's becoming paranoid, talking about people plotting against her. I'm genuinely concerned for her safety." Paranoid. That single word crystallized everything. I wasn't paranoid, I was aware. I was paying attention to the subtle manipulation, the gradual erosion of my autonomy. Standing in my own bathroom, surrounded by the familiar comforts of my life, I realized I was fighting for more than just my house. I was fighting for my dignity, my independence, and my right to make my own decisions. That night, after Michael and Dr. Harrison left, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea and made a decision that would change everything. I picked up my phone and called Judge Patricia Williams, a retired family court judge who lived 3 blocks away. We'd served together on the library board for years, and I knew her to be a woman of integrity and sharp intelligence. "Patricia," I said, "I need your help with something rather delicate." Judge Williams listened without interruption as I explained the situation. When I finished, there was a long pause before she spoke. "Eleanor, what you're describing is elder financial abuse, and it's more common than people realize. But proving it can be challenging. You need documentation, witnesses, evidence of their intentions." "I have an idea about that," I replied, a plan already forming in my mind. Over the next 2 weeks, I quietly gathered evidence. I recorded conversations with Michael where he questioned my mental capacity. I took photographs of the care facility brochures he'd left around my house. I documented every instance of him undermining my confidence or questioning my decisions. Most importantly, I maintained detailed notes of his financial requests over the past 2 years, the loans I'd given him, the co-signed debts, the monthly allowance I'd been providing to help with his business. Then I set the trap. I called Michael and told him I'd been thinking seriously about his concerns regarding my living situation. I suggested we have a family meeting to discuss my future, and I asked him to bring Dr. Harrison again, since his professional opinion would be valuable. I also mentioned that I'd invited my attorney, Mr. Davidson, to join us, though I conveniently failed to mention that Judge Williams would be there as well. The dinner party was scheduled for this evening, and as I put the finishing touches on the dining room, I felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. The good china gleamed under the chandelier, and the roast was perfectly prepared. Everything looked like a typical family gathering, but underneath the facade of normalcy lay careful planning and strategic thinking. Michael arrived promptly at 6 with Jennifer and Dr. Harrison. They were dressed formally, as if attending a business meeting rather than a family dinner. Michael's eyes swept the room, taking inventory of valuable items: my mother's silver, the antique furniture, the original paintings my husband had collected over the years. I saw him mentally calculating worth, and my heart hardened against any remaining doubt about his motivations. "Where's Mr. Davidson?" Michael asked, settling into his chair with the confidence of someone who believed he was orchestrating events. "He'll be joining us shortly," I replied, ladling soup into their bowls with steady hands. I invited another friend as well, Judge Williams, from down the street. I thought it would be good to have multiple perspectives. I saw Michael stiffen slightly at the mention of a judge, but Dr. Harrison leaned forward with interest. "A judge? How interesting. I'd love to meet her." As if summoned by our conversation, the doorbell rang. I excused myself and returned moments later with Judge Williams, an elegant woman in her 70s with steel-gray hair and penetrating blue eyes that missed nothing. She'd agreed to attend not in any official capacity, but as a concerned neighbor and family friend who happened to have extensive experience in matters of elder law. The conversation began pleasantly enough, with typical family small talk and compliments on the meal. But as we moved through the courses, Michael began steering the discussion toward his agenda. He spoke about his concerns for my safety, my supposed forgetfulness, the burden of maintaining such a large house at my age. "Mom has been having some episodes," he explained to Judge Williams, his voice heavy with fake concern. "Last week, she called me 3 times about the same doctor's appointment. She's been leaving lights on, forgetting to lock doors. Jennifer and I are really worried." Judge Williams nodded thoughtfully, then turned to me. "Eleanor, how do you feel about these concerns?" This was my moment. I reached into the sideboard drawer and withdrew a manila folder containing all my documentation. "Actually, Patricia, I'm glad you asked. I've been keeping careful records of these alleged incidents, and I think everyone should see what's really happening here." I opened the folder and began reading from my notes, each entry dated and detailed. The 3 times I'd called Michael about the doctor's appointment, I had phone records showing he'd called me first each time, asking me to repeat information he claimed he couldn't remember. The unlocked doors and lights? I had photos showing that these incidents occurred when Michael had visited and left through different exits than the ones I typically used. Michael's face grew red as I continued reading. "Mom, what are you doing? Why are you keeping files on your family?" "Because," I replied calmly, "when someone systematically tries to undermine your mental capacity, Documentation becomes necessary for self-protection. Dr. Harrison shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Judge Williams leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable but her attention completely focused. I continued with my evidence, presenting recorded conversations where Michael questioned my memory about events that had never occurred. I showed them the financial records detailing the $50,000 I'd loaned him over the past 18 months of money he claimed he couldn't remember borrowing. I read from emails where he discussed Mom's situation with Jennifer, planning how to convince me to sell the house and move to assisted living. The truth is, I said, looking directly at my son, there's nothing wrong with my mental capacity. What's wrong is a son who sees his mother as a financial resource rather than a human being deserving of respect and autonomy. The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer stared at her plate, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Dr. Harrison cleared his throat and excused himself, claiming a sudden need to leave. But Michael's reaction was the most telling. His facade of concern crumbled, replaced by anger and desperation. "You're being manipulative and paranoid," he snapped. "Everything I've done has been out of love and concern." Judge Williams finally spoke, her voice carrying the authority of decades on the bench. "Michael, I've been listening carefully tonight, and what I've observed is a clear pattern of psychological manipulation designed to undermine your mother's confidence in her own mental capacity. In legal terms, what you've described sounds very much like attempted elder abuse." Michael's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You can't be serious. She's my mother. I'm trying to help her." "Help?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You've been systematically trying to convince me I'm losing my mind so you can gain control of my assets. You brought a psychiatrist to my dinner table under false pretenses. You've been planting doubts about my competency for months. That's not help, Michael. That's abuse." The confrontation that followed was ugly but necessary. Michael alternated between denial, anger, and desperate attempts to justify his actions. He claimed financial stress, mentioned his failing business, insisted that he was only thinking of my best interests. But with each excuse, he revealed more of his true motivations. Jennifer finally found her voice, tears streaming down her face. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry. I knew this was wrong. But Michael convinced me you were really struggling. I should have spoken up." "Yes," I agreed. "You should have. But you chose to participate in trying to gaslight an elderly woman instead of protecting her. That says something about your character." Judge Williams remained for another hour after Michael and Jennifer left in angry, embarrassed silence. We discussed the legal implications of what had occurred and the steps I could take to protect myself from future manipulation. She assured me that my documentation was thorough and that no court would find me incompetent based on the evidence I'd presented. "Eleanor," she said as she prepared to leave, "what you did tonight took tremendous courage. Many people in your situation don't recognize the manipulation until it's too late." "I had a good teacher," I replied, thinking of my late husband who always told me to trust my instincts and stand up for myself. In the days that followed, I took several protective steps. I updated my will to reflect my true wishes rather than what Michael expected to inherit. I established a trust to manage my assets and appointed Judge Williams as trustee, ensuring that no one could manipulate me into making financial decisions under duress. I also sent certified letters to both Michael and Dr. Harrison, making it clear that any future attempts to question my mental capacity would be met with legal action. Most importantly, I reached out to other elderly people in my community who might be facing similar situations. I discovered that elder financial abuse is shockingly common, with adult children often being the primary perpetrators. I began volunteering with a local organization that helps seniors recognize and combat these schemes. The relationship with my son may never fully recover, and that breaks my heart in ways I can't fully express. But I've learned that sometimes protecting yourself requires making difficult choices about family. Love shouldn't come at the expense of dignity, and care shouldn't be contingent on surrender of autonomy. Michael has made a few attempts to reconcile, but they've all included conditions about discussing my living situation or getting professional assessment of my needs. He still doesn't understand that respecting my right to make my own decisions is non-negotiable. Until he can approach me as an equal rather than a problem to be solved, Our relationship remains strained. 6 months have passed since that dinner party, and I'm thriving in ways I never expected. My house remains my own, filled with friends who visit because they enjoy my company rather than because they want something from me. I've started taking art classes at the community center and joined a book club. I travel to visit old friends without asking anyone's permission or justifying my choices. The irony isn't lost on me that in trying to prove I was incompetent, Michael forced me to demonstrate just how sharp, resourceful, and resilient I actually am. His manipulation backfired spectacularly, turning me from a potentially vulnerable target into an empowered advocate for elder rights. Little Emma still visits, though these meetings happen at my house rather than family gatherings. I'm teaching her to bake cookies and telling her stories about her grandfather. She's never again asked why Daddy thinks Grandma is too crazy to own a house, but I've prepared an age-appropriate answer about how sometimes people make mistakes about other people's abilities. The judge who came to dinner that night didn't just witness my vindication. She became part of my support system and helped me understand that standing up for yourself isn't selfish or paranoid. It's necessary. It's healthy. It's the right of every person, regardless of age, to be treated with dignity and respect. As I sit in my beautiful dining room this evening, polishing the silver and arranging fresh flowers, I'm filled with gratitude rather than bitterness. Yes, I lost the illusion of having a caring, supportive son, but I gained something more valuable, the absolute certainty that I can trust my own judgment, protect my own interests, and create a life filled with genuine relationships rather than manipulative ones. The house that Michael tried to take from me has become more than just a place to live. It's become a symbol of my strength, my independence, and my refusal to be diminished by anyone's false narrative about my capabilities. Every room holds memories of the life I've built, and every day I choose to stay here is an act of defiance against those who would reduce me to a problem to be managed rather than a person to be respected. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to see clearly, speak truthfully, and refuse to accept treatment that diminishes your worth. That dinner party was the most important meal I've ever served, not because of the food, but because it was where I served notice that this grandmother is nobody's victim and nobody's fool.